Hello, and welcome everyone to NJ Thrive's Small Business Webinars. Today is Thursday, November 30th, and you are attending our weekly webinars created to help New Jersey small business owners start, grow, and thrive. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you for joining us today. Today is the last day of November. I hope it was well spent. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving break. I'm your host, Uzma Sheikh, and I'm a consultant here at NJSBDC, which stands for New Jersey Small Business Development Centers. It is a network here in the state of New Jersey, powered by the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and partners like NJDAC to help small businesses in New Jersey with three key things. And those are no cost small business consulting, training and events starting at $0, just like this webinar that you're attending, and exclusive small business resources. If you have been attending our tech series webinars, or if you have been attending our NJ Thrives webinars, thank you so much for your support. We always appreciate it. And if you're new here and you found this webinar, we welcome you to our series and our weekly webinars, and we hope that you continue to join us every week. On the map over there, you'll see that there's, of course, the state of New Jersey divided into all the counties, and you'll see there's small SBDC logos. That's where our regional centers are located. So if you'd like to attend in-person events, then our centers would be where you would go in person. But you could also check us out on njsbdc.com. And the tech team that I just mentioned and the webinar that you're attending is and the consultant, our speaker, is part of that tech team. So what is the tech team? We are an NJSBDC exclusive commercialization team providing technical support and guidance to eligible innovators for SBIR and STTR grants to fund the R&D towards commercialization of tech innovation. So still part of the NJSBDC team, it's just one of our teams that are providing services for R&D innovators. Our services include no-cost pitch to proposal consulting, training events like this one starting at $0, and exclusive small business tech resources. If you'd like to learn more about the tech team, please go to njsbc.com/tech team. While I go through the agenda, please feel free to let us know where you're from and who you are, what you do, what your small business is about. If you have a virtual business or an in-person business, and we'd love for you to network in the comments. I always like to say that you never know, because these webinars are, on the web, they're virtual, and they're not in person. There's that greater chance of missing of networking, but there's always chat for that. So feel free to share if you'd like in the chat. The agenda. So we have a couple of headlines that we like to share from our small business community. I'll go over them very briefly. And then we have, of course, what you're here for, our presentation from our speaker. And then after that, we'll have our Q&A session. So let me just quickly go through our headlines. The first is from pbs.org, and this is an interview of our CEO and State Director, Kelly Brosna. So NJ Biz Beat with Raven Santana. You guys might be familiar with this, but the episode aired on the 11th of this month. Raven Santana sits down with the state business leaders and mentors to discuss the steps on how to open a successful business. So it's a 26-minute clip if you'd like to watch. Next is a press release from NJEDA shared on November 28th, so 2 days ago. NJEDA opens the NJ Capital Access Fund, working capital loans with competitive interest rates and no collateral requirement will support New Jersey small businesses. This is the opening of of course, the Capital Fund, helping CDFIs leverage community development financial institutions and minority depository institutions to offer a working capital loan product that will better serve New Jersey-based small businesses. Fund managers Calvert Impact funding for a $100 million fund supporting this program. Will raise private capital and will be used to purchase up to 80% of every eligible loan by participating community lenders. So pretty cool stuff, lots of information, many links in here to be shared. I hope you guys check it out through the links shared in the chat. The final link that I'm sharing is NJBIA, New Jersey Business and Industry Association. Negativity leveling off as businesses seek the light. This is the 65th annual NJBIA Business Outlook Survey. And it has been released today, so November 27th, not today, 3 days ago. And it's the survey findings, actually. So this is really cool. Small business owners should always keep a lookout for survey insights to see where the public opinion is swaying, which side it is, or how they're feeling, especially on what's happening throughout the state of New Jersey. So for example, inflation and affordability, energy costs and EVs, profits, staffing, employment, wages, competitive levels, lots of good information. Check it out. The links are being shared in the chat. All right, so we've done that. What's the next thing? Some housekeeping rules that we like to share with our audience. If you have any questions, you'll see a Q&A box right next to the chat box. Please share your questions in the Q&A, and we'll go over them in the Q&A session right after the presentation. If you put them in the chat, they'll get lost in all the links and comments and everything that's being shared by us and you. And we do want to make sure that we want to address your question. If you'd like to receive the presenter's slides, then please complete a brief survey and you'll receive them. And keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available for your viewing in maybe 1 to 2 business days on our YouTube channel as well as our website. And those links are also being shared. All right, so this is the 8th webinar of the tech series, SBIR STTR Budgeting for Success. We have Cheryl Vickroy, who's one of our tech team consultants. She's wonderful and has done many SBIR STTR webinars for us in the past, many of which are available on our video library. So please make sure to check them out. So for this, Cheryl, welcome. Thank you for doing this for us always. And we look forward to getting lots of helpful information from you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Uzma. And let me share my screen here and pull up the presentation for everyone. Just one moment. Here we go. So hopefully it says you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yep. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. This series is about tips for success on drafting your SBIR STTR budget. So we'll get started. Many of you have perhaps seen my presentations before, but I'll give you just a little bit about my background once again. I had a first part of my career working in industry, and then the second part of my career has really been completely focused on all things related to commercialization of innovation. So I both am an entrepreneur like many of you and have been inside 5 or 6 different early stage firms, all tech-based, and 2 of those I led as CEO. So I can relate to your experiences in that way. For many years, I have worked both in Wisconsin and now in New Jersey for the part of the state support that does provide support for SBIR STTR applicants in terms of making sure that they have highly competitive applications and can win funding. In doing all of that, I've run a private consulting business as well, where altogether I've helped people collaborated with people on acquiring well more than 150 million in federal funding at this point. I kind of stopped counting a few years ago. I also instruct. I'm an adjunct faculty in the Master's in Science in Biotech program at the UW-Madison, as well as now mentoring and providing a little bit of teaching support in the Rutgers University MS in Business degree program. And I have also invested in several early stage firms, both as an individual angel with Silicon Pastures Angel Network out of Milwaukee, and currently as a limited partner in Bell Capital USA, which is a $10 million fund run mainly to help fund women-based or women-run small businesses. My background is in business, but because I've been working now for 20 some odd years in the very technical realms, I do know a fair amount about lots of different types of science and technology as well. So welcome again. Our agenda will speak first on turning your work plan into a fundable budget for SBIR STTR funding. I'll touch on avoiding unallowable costs. I'll talk about preparing some auxiliary documents that include your budget justification and various types of letters. And then at the end, speak very briefly about managing an award budget. The slides today are fairly dense, so I'll give you that heads up first. What that means is they have a lot of detail on them. However, in order to compensate for that, we have fewer slides than normal. And of course, you're welcome to raise questions as we go, but I won't really call on anyone until the end of the presentation. So if you just want to maybe jot your questions down, that's also a great idea, because then if I haven't covered them by the end of the presentation, you can raise them again, and we'll just handle those one by one at the end. So I think there'll be a good amount of time today for questions, because today I'm going to do my best for you to outline a lot of generalities, generic information about budgets across all of the agencies. However, there are many differences among the agencies in how they treat certain line items in the budget, and thus, you may have specific questions that apply only to you. So with that, we'll kick it off with a very brief review. I don't know if any of you are just joining me for the first time today and haven't been a part of this series before. Uzma mentioned when she did the introduction that, in fact, this is really a program centered on small business, but clearly also centered on innovation and centered on doing research. The letters SBIR stand for Small Business Innovation Research. Now, a small business applicant can be up to 500 employees, believe it or not, but we must have the presence of innovation, which means that there's some relatively novel technical aspects and also very high risk. You yourself might be the perfect one to pull off this project, but it would be high risk for others. And there's also potential to develop intellectual property, or what we call IP. I'll talk a moment about the various phases, so I won't stress that here. There is another brand of this funding also, which is known as STTR, and in this case, it stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. So in that case, in addition to your small business, there's a co-applicant who has something that you need in order to commercialize the outcome of your work. And I'll talk about that in greater detail going forward. There are several different phases for this work. Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Now, across all of the agencies, phase 1 is pretty much almost exclusively focused on what we call feasibility or proof of concept. We need to have a technical project proposal. You need to understand at least a little bit about the market need and the opportunity, and then put together some things, including the team, the environment and facilities, and then, of course, the budget, which is what we're here to talk about today. Phase two is more focused on prototyping. You'll see that I highlighted that across the top. So you provide a phase one final report. You do have to delve much more deeply into the commercialization aspects with a commercialization plan. But once again, the main focus is on the technical proposal, the team, the environment, and the budget. Phase three, we won't talk about today at all. That is post these other sorts of funding that you can acquire, but that's really focused on commercialization. So it's focused on all the things that you would need to do to execute to launch a product into the market. At the top here, and hope you can see my arrow, you'll notice that I put ranges for the timelines and also for the dollar amounts. That is very important because that does vary agency by agency, and we're here to help you figure out, exactly which agency is a great fit for you and how you move forward. A little bit more detail about phase one. So what do we mean when we say technical proof of concept or feasibility? This varies by industry and domain. So depending upon your type of technology, it may include something about safety, it may include something about efficacy, validation of such, etc. But basically, it's a kind of a fundamental proof that would be accepted by other scientists or technical people in your realm, that your project is worthy of additional future funding. There are a few variations here. DoD treats this a little bit differently, actually quite differently. So we won't talk about that right in the moment. But as I said earlier, or showed the range earlier, these awards are typically from 6 to 12 months, although they can be anywhere from 2, as low as 2, up to 12. And the award dollar amounts are typically somewhere between $275,000 and $305,000, although they can be quite low with DoD Air Force and also relatively low with USDA. So there are some generalities, but there are also a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. And that's why it's important to work with us so we can help you know what best applies to you. The rule of thumb, though, is that you would allocate more or less 53% of your total budget to the technical research and development. And I'm going to introduce that here and then deepen that as we move forward. So you don't get the full amount to do purely technical work. Some of the work is diverted to other expenses that you would have in your small business. Phase two, as I mentioned a moment ago, is the purpose of that is for prototyping, which means that you're going to create a near market ready version of your product, whether that be a widget or a service. So often in the case of life sciences realm, we have much deeper and more broad proof of safety and efficacy. But we also may have, if you have another type of technology, that may be another type of validation, again, varying by industry and your particular technology. But essentially, we're hardening the design, doing some optimizing, and also really preparing for commercialization. Phase two typically extends up to 2 years, and it can be as low as $750K, or as much as 2 to 3 million. And I see that I have a typo here. This should say 53%. So I'll correct that in my slides before they go up for publication. But once again, we have other parts of the budget allocated towards non-technical items. So how do we begin? Well, first of all, by the time you get to trying to draft a budget, you first have outlined the scope of work that you want the federal agencies to fund for you. So it's important to know and align with the agency missions and priorities, And once you outline a scope of work, I recommend that people do this kind of in a rough way because it's rare that you would land on the perfect scope of work the first time through. So we outline a scope of work, we draft a rough budget with the knowledge that this is going to change. We work through this a couple of times in a very iterative way. Each objective and task must be entirely pre-planned. So you have to think about what will prove that your idea is feasible. Is it something along the line of theoretical or conceptual work using theorems, calculations, etc.? Are you able to build a small scale model? Can you prove efficacy in an animal before you go on to prove it in humans? And if you're beginning to prove safety, we have to think about such thing as dosing schedules and so on and so forth. But your particular scope must realistically build to a proof of concept in phase 1 and a working prototype in phase 2. Once you draft that, you also take a look and make sure that you have the proper facilities, either already or that you put the building out those proper facilities into your budget. So the environment needs to be ready to conduct the work that you propose, and you need to have several team members, or at least one or two, typically, who have the skills and expertise to do exactly what it is that you want to undertake. Hiring and onboarding takes time, so we think about who goes on the payroll, even if it's in the future. And we think about what roles may be filled by consultants and or contractors. And then we ask ourselves, can some people fill dual roles? In other words, if we had some technicians, could they also collect, organize, and input invoices? However, we always need someone with exceptional project management skills. Ideally, that's the principal investigator, who can oversee all the technical work while coordinating also to grow the business. Once we get ready to move forward on the rough budget, we think about all the various cost categories that exist. So across the board, pretty much all of the agencies think about these specific cost categories. The direct costs include such things as salaries, which are directly related to the personnel that you either have in your small business or you're going to hire. That might include your senior personnel, but also what the agencies refer to as other personnel, and I'll give the definitions of that in the next few slides. We think about fringe benefits, which are such things as paid time off, vacation, if there are any other benefits as employment, as employees, and so on and so forth. We think about equipment, travel, and then other direct costs, which are lumped together in a particular line in the budget, but which usually consist of materials and supplies, any consultant services that you may need, any subawards that you may have, and then a category called other costs, which is sometimes used and sometimes not. In addition to all these direct costs, we also have a category which is called indirect costs, and that is for the overhead for the company, the small business, or it's also referred to sometimes as general and administrative, or G&A. And then lastly, we have your profit or fee. So you do get to, you, the small business, get to have a small fee or profit for doing this work in recognition of your efforts. And I'll talk again about what you can use that for and what you shouldn't use it for in a moment going forward. So let's do some definitions. Senior personnel in the salaries line are generally referred to as those whose expertise is very specific and absolutely crucial to the project's success. This would include the principal investigator and any other employees who have highly specialized skills. They're working for the company or they're going to work for the company in the future, but they have highly specialized skills, and the reviewers will take into account thinking about the qualifications of these folks as they consider whether or not to give you an award. They also have a category called other personnel. These folks are also important, but they would be considered substitutable without endangering the success of the work. So often these folks are people with maybe more generic skill sets, like technicians or programmers, who, if you lost them, the project would not be at risk. You'd be able to replace them with someone else who has similar skills and capabilities, and the project would still be able to move forward. What do we need to understand about all of these folks? Well, we need to understand what their base salary is, the level of effort that they will put towards the project, and the amount of time that they will be needed. So will they be needed in month 1 and 6, or will they be needed across the entire 6 months of the project, or 12 months? All of these are calculated in order to figure out how much time the project needs from them, and therefore what is the cost. There's another category called fringe benefits, which is sometimes, depending on the agency, considered a direct cost. That's why this says if charged as direct costs, and why the caveat here is noted that the treatment varies by agency, because there are certain agencies that treat fringe in the indirect cost pool, not in the direct cost pool. So this is a good area where, you know, we can lend you a hand if you need one. The equipment is defined as a single item costing greater than or equal to $5,000, and under tax law would be considered a depreciable asset. So you can see that this is more than what I would call minor equipment, which costs less than $5,000 and goes into a different category in your budget. There's also in the direct cost pool a line for travel, which is allowed at some points, but only for very specific or specified purposes, mainly to do with other agency trainings that they want you to attend. Now, when we get to some other definitions in the other direct cost category, here we're talking about materials and supplies, as I introduced a couple slides back. This is a list of justifiable materials and or supplies that you will need in order to carry out the proposed project, with the cost estimates attached. Consultant services is also a part of the other direct costs. These, once again, need to be justifiable. So it's specialized expertise that is needed to carry out the proposed project, but someone who you wouldn't necessarily need or want to hire. Their skills are almost so specialized that you would only use them in your firm for a short bit of time or to get you started, but you wouldn't ordinarily hire these people on board permanently. These may include people like EPA or FDA regulatory consultants, and sometimes they're not necessarily allowed in phase 1, but are typically allowed in phase 2. This cost category also includes contract research organizations or contract manufacturing organizations, which are known as CROs or CMOs, and or other work for hire, wherein no IP, no intellectual property is expected to be created or shared. Also, under the other direct costs definition is a subaward if you are applying for an STTR. Let me give an example or two about when you would be using this category with your collaborator. So essentially, this means that you are proposing to do something, but you lack in your small business, you lack the very specialized skills or equipment, for example, or access to equipment to carry that out. In that case, the decision is made by you that you need a collaborator in order to win this federal funding. And there are certain percentages of work that then must be done by your small business and also by the subawardee. The subawardee, the research institution, and by that I mean either a federal lab or a university, very commonly a university, but sometimes also a federal lab. In this case, the subawardee, or for example, if it were Rutgers University or Princeton, they would create their own modular STTR application, which is then dropped in or attached to that of the applicant's small business. So they do a fair amount of preparatory work, and then this kind of gets modularized and dropped into your budget and your proposal, etc. In this case, with an STTR, IP sharing is often anticipated, and the sharing agreements are worked out in advance of the submission. I may talk more about this later on or entertain questions in this regard, but let me move on at this point to the definitions of the last category of other direct costs, which is known as other. This is not commonly used, with an exception of the NSF Beat the Odds Boot Camp or maybe TABA expenses, which I'm not going to cover today. But as you can tell, the federal government doesn't want a lot of loose ends put into that category. So if we're working with you, we'll tell you if there's something that needs to go in that cost category. You won't have to work it out on your own. Let's move on to definitions of the indirect costs, those in the indirect cost pool, which, as I mentioned before, is also known as overhead for your small business or general and administrative, and known by the acronym G&A. Essentially, the definition of indirect costs are costs that may be apportioned across several projects, including the one for which you're requesting federal funding. But they can't be specifically allocated to only the federal funding project. These are things such as rent, fringe benefits if not charged as direct costs, accounting services, tax preparation, insurance, etc., etc. They're essentially funds that are needed to build your business. So besides doing the technical work that you propose, that the federal government would pay for you, they also want you to build a successful small business. So they offer you several kinds of funds, and these funds may be up to 40% of your total direct costs without any specific justification. In other words, the government recognizes that up to 40% of the total paid to you can be used without any listing or estimating of the costs, etc. You don't have to do any justification for the federal government as long as you're at or under 40% of your total direct costs. Lastly, and this in some ways is the most crucial category, this is the definition of the profit or fee. All small businesses, when they apply through this program, can and should request a 7% fee as the firm's profit. Why? Well, this is the only unrestricted funding that you get. So you want to protect it at all costs. In other words, you can use this funding for anything, costs which are otherwise not allowed, including patenting, marketing, and while this pool of funds can even be used to pay for research, that is not a great use of it because it's completely unrestricted. You can use it for whatever you'd like, and you want to. There are so many unallowable costs, which I'll talk about in a bit here, that you want to protect that 7% no matter what. It's figured as 7% of the total project costs, which includes the direct and the indirect. And there is absolutely no need to justify it for the federal government. In other words, you don't need to tell them what you're going to spend that 7% profit on. Now, I mentioned a moment ago about unallowable costs. There are several kinds of costs which are literally not allowed. And if you put them in your budget, at some point it will be rejected. Even if your project is good and if they want to fund your work, they're going to come back to you and say, you can't have these costs in there. These are defined by legislation. And so loosely across all of the agencies, the costs in order to be allowed have to meet the criteria of being reasonable and allowable. And if they are not consistently across all realms, then they are not allowed. There are some specifics. Non-federal entities cannot use, award, or match funding for unallowable costs, and any costs considered inappropriate by the specific awarding agency are also considered unallowable. If this is your first time through and you're doing a phase 1 application, again, this is an area where you might want to have us take a peek at your budget and see how you've constructed it, just to make sure that you don't have any unallowable costs, since they vary agency to agency. But across the board, we know that they are not allowed to do any marketing, any advertising, any charitable contributions, and any alcoholic beverages. Most often also food, but that's a minor exception. So you want to make sure that you avoid putting these types of costs in your budget and stick to the ones that I've showed you earlier that are acceptable. Here, I've mocked up an example calculation for a basic phase 1 award. So if we assume, for example, that your phase 1 award is $295,000, right away, we take off the fee or profit, which is $20,650, leaving you a remaining budget of $274,350. When we subtract your indirect rate, 40% of this amount, it leaves you with a direct budget of $195,964 and an indirect budget of $78,386. So you can see that even though your award is somewhere around $295,000, your research is going to be about $100,000 less than that. The costs of all the things that are your direct costs that feed into your research. And then there is this set aside for your indirect costs, such as rent, tax prep, accounting, and so on and so forth. Now, this is an example only because there are lots of ifs, ands, or buts by agency. That's where we come in. But the main question, the next question, most important one, is can you do your project for this amount? That's why you only rough up the scope of work first and then rough up the budget. Because if you find that your rough budget is too high, you have to go back and reduce the scope. It's important that these things equal or are aligned, and you need to iterate on them until they're aligned. So you think about such things as, what is the deliverable? What is your ultimate deliverable? Well, it's feasibility or proof of concept, but that'll be defined in several distinct ways based on, the type of technology that you have. You have to think about how much time does it really take to get your team together and get everyone pulling in the same direction? How much will it really cost using market rate salaries, because we want you to be able to hire people? And keep in mind, there's effort expended on the part of the team towards building the business itself. So you're thinking about all of these things as a small business owner or an entrepreneur, and these are very crucial for you. Once finalized in this kind of mock environment where you've roughed up the scope and you've roughed up the budget, you do eventually have to enter all of the budget figures into a form that's online. So you can use Excel spreadsheets to get started, especially in phase one, and we have some templates we can share with you. But once you get ready to actually submit your work, you'll fill out a very detailed mock budget, such as the example that I'm showing you here on the right side of the screen. This one is particular to NIH, and of course, in order for me to show you the printing at a large enough font for you to read it, I could only get in the first few lines. I couldn't do all of the lines that are shown, which also dictate all the other direct cost categories, the indirects, and so on and so forth. But I did want to show you an example of how detailed this is. Now, in addition to the budget, I'm going to switch topics now and talk a little bit about the justification, and I'm going to talk about the letters that are required and so on and so forth. So we're leaving the realm of the financial calculations and getting into the accompanying documents. So there is a required text document that accompanies the spreadsheet. It's known as a budget justification. And you'll see here that we're not doing any calculations, we're not doing any math, but I've put a small example of the kind of text that you would put into this document. So for example, if you're doing your senior and key personnel and your other personnel, you'll identify each role in the project and you'll talk about what will they contribute? Who are they? What will they contribute? How many hours will they expend? What is the hourly labor rate for them? And then you'll identify the basis for the labor rates, whether that be something from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or someone else. And then you'll identify whether or not fringe benefits are attached to this particular individual and why, depending upon the agency. So you go through each of the cost categories with this text justification. Again, this is where it gets a little complicated, so you should reach out to us. We can help you with the calculations, with what goes in the budget justification, and we'll make it much, much simpler for you to complete with our assistance than if you try to do this on your own. Beyond the justification, there are also several kinds of letters that are needed. And here, once again, I'm talking sort of generically. This varies based on the agency to which you're applying, but you may need a letter of commitment from any currently not employed principal investigator. In other words, if the principal investigator has been identified but isn't going to join your firm until time of award, you'll need a letter of commitment that's signed by them that says, I'm going to join your firm at the time of an award to do X, Y, and Z for you. You also will need letters of commitment from any consultants or contractors that you're hiring and putting in your budget. And depending upon whether they're consultants or contractors, they may also need additional auxiliary documents such as biosketches or quotes. You definitely would need a letter of commitment from any subawardee. And that is a formal letter, not just from the individual that you're speaking with, but literally a formal letter signed by the university or the federal lab leadership. So this is a process that takes some time, often to work out. It's one of the reasons why you want to start your SBIR STTR quite a bit earlier than the submission deadline. Other letters may be needed, but I'm not going to speak about them today because they're unrelated to the budget. In other words, there's no dollar amounts associated with them, whereas these three kinds of letters of commitment have specific dollar amounts associated with them. So those are the two auxiliary type of things that broad categories of auxiliary documents that we need related to the budget. That's the justification and the letters. We're coming up on 15 minutes before the hour, and I'm almost done with my presentation, so we'll get to all your questions. But I want to talk about briefly also managing the funding in order to avoid an audit. Now, an audit can be demanded in the same way that IRS are IRS audits are randomly demanded. However, if you do these certain things, you'll be in great shape should one come your way. And the likelihood is also that if you do these things, the likelihood is that you won't be audited. So first of all, you want to set up a separate bank account for your firm if you don't have one. If you're just an individual starting your company, you have probably a personal checking account. You would definitely want to have an entirely separate bank account for your business. And ideally with dual controls, meaning you'll assign a person responsible for bringing in any revenue that you have and a separate person responsible for paying expenses. You definitely want to make sure that all the employee time worked is recorded associated with the award, because at some point you'll have to show those records either to get your next tranche of funding or perhaps at the end of the project. You'll even up what you've asked for and what you've been paid. You want to record any other expenses, such as, your materials and supplies, payments that go to your subcontractors or to you consultants, etc. And then you'll record your profits as well. So at some point later on, once you get an award, you'll need to consider whether or not you could run QuickBooks or a similar accounting program, or if you need to hire a specialist and pay them out of your overhead. You'll also have to manage the deliverables. Reports are required, and sometimes unique financial reports are required. And you'll have to think ahead in terms of the timing, because both the work once you're awarded goes quickly, and as well, you also are wanting to prepare for your phase 2 award, which takes some time. Successful phase 2 applicants finish their phase 1 on time and on budget, and a final report is required. I also recommend a bit of relationship building with the agency. In other words, if they're providing funding to you, you want to engage with them and let them know that you're able to successfully take care of all these deliverables. We have one last slide, I guess, sorry. And that is the timing of the award payments. This is a review slide. I've gone over this in a prior presentation, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today because I see we have quite a few questions. But you do want to give a thought towards the timing of the award payments, when those monies will be paid out to you, so that you can begin to set up things inside your business in order to manage them. Again, both the funding and the deliverables. That should bring me to the end of the presentation. There are many reasons to pursue this type of funding so that you can develop new products or services for commercial scale, in order to establish sole source marketing positions with government agencies. And always, the process is worth it for the strategies that you develop, the planning that you do, and the people and partners that you meet in order to grow your small business. We are here to help you get started. Federal funding is available in the billions of dollars, although it is highly competitive. Planning invested can reap lots of rewards, and these techniques for success can be learned. So do collaborate with us and let us help you. With that, I'll put my last slide, which shows several resources that are available to you, and we'll open it up for Q&A. Thank you so much for your attention. It's always a pleasure to assist you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. We do have quite a lot of questions, and that's always a good sign. I'll ask you to keep your slides up because we do have some references to the slides. So
Good.
Let's get into them. And yes, we do have very interesting questions. So I'll go in the order that we received them. First question, I think I'll take that, but if you have anything to add, feel free to. This is an NJSBDC, if we can help type of question. Quentin asks, if you have a Delaware C business, can you still apply for NJ-based support? From from the general NJSBDC side, excuse me, you have to be a resident of New Jersey, the state of New Jersey to receive, or your business has to be based in New Jersey for you to receive I know there are some nuances with the tech side, with awards and proposals and things like that. So I'll let Cheryl answer that. Before, like, let's say to receive any type of general counseling from NJSBDC, your business or your residence has to be in New Jersey. But feel free to answer with more details, and I encourage you to reach out to us via request counseling and just share your details, and we'll let you know if you qualify.
A Delaware C Corp, by the way, is eligible because many people, if they're doing a C Corp, they will domicile it in Delaware. That doesn't mean that the business is located there. That just
Mm-hmm.
means that any legal matters are taken care of. This is not the case for an LLC. This is the case for a C Corp only. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. If you're domiciled in New Jersey, we should be able to help you.
Awesome. Thank you. And next question is also from Quentin, who asks SBIR question, feasibility first. Does that mean customer discovery versus building research? Okay, that's an incomplete question, but if
I think
that
I
makes sense.
understand it though.
Okay.
Yeah. So customer discovery is something entirely different that the agencies will want you to do, but ironically, it's done outside of phase one. You can do it before phase one. That's not a problem, or during or after. But because it has to do with market research, it is not a part of your phase one project. The phase one project is purely technical.
Got it. All right. Thank you. And next question is from Chris. They ask for other direct costs, referring to the slide that you had where you were breaking down. Is there a
Uh-huh.
difference between raw materials for fabrication of test fixtures, and purchased sub-assemblies from external vendors?
No, in phase one in particular, a lot of times people use off the shelf components. And so either of those could be considered materials and supplies.
Got it. There was a question. I'll just veer off from the our Q&A box. I had noticed while the presentation was going on. Um, and a similar question, James asked in the is there any list of funded projects with details for review? I know you've covered this before in your previous webinars. So,
Sure.
yep, just a sidebar, James, on that. Please go to our video library and look for our webinars with Cheryl. In the video library, you'll see the names of the webinars, and you'll see a little bubble with Cheryl's face on, so you'll recognize it immediately as SBIR STTR. So we do address that in our previous webinars. I just wanted to mention that before I forgot. All right. Anonymous asked, is an equipment rental of $3,500 per month for 6 month phase one time frame allowed?
Yeah. Equipment rental is considered access. I would want to know more about the details here in order to give you a very uh, completely correct answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very likely that we'd be able to find a way to cover it if it's justifiable for the work that you need to do. But where we put that in the budget may vary based on which agency you're applying to. So that would be a good one to reach out on. Likely, we'd find a way. It may be in the indirect cost pool, depending upon the big picture.
Got it. Yeah, Anonymous, feel free to reach out to us via email or request counseling for questions like this. Like Cheryl mentioned, we definitely would love to get to know more details and have an appointment with you for a counseling session. So definitely reach out. All right, next question is from Chris as well. Are other personnel employees of the proposing company, or can they be consultants?
Yeah, when you're constructing the budget, you would never put a consultant in the other personnel line because the other personnel line is under the salaries category, and the salaries category is only for W-2 employees. It's never for 1099 employees.
Right. Next question. Can a travel to test facilities be included?
Not commonly. Occasionally it might be. That's one of those questions where, in order to give you a really precise answer, I'd like to know more, because we may be able to find a way, but travel is usually not recommended to be just included without a consult in a phase one application in particular.
Got it. Um, we have a question from Robert who asks, do you have experience with NIH and VA funding as SBIR, STTR, and other funding?
Lots and lots of experience with NIH. I've been working with them for 23 years. VA is a part of that doesn't, they have just been added recently within the past 12 months in terms of having their own budget for SBIR STTR. So what I have done more commonly, because they just came on board recently along with the CDC, is NIH omnibus funding where they're a collaborator. But I am familiar with the fact that they've been added and they have a small amount of funding, and would be happy to help you know more about that. I'm doing a CDC one right now.
Got it. Thank you for that. Um, Chris asked, how do we get a preliminary budget review?
Well, if you sign up for consulting as Uzma was directing you, or do you see the link on this slide where it says Tech Team? I'm not sure that's a live link because it's in black. But maybe if you go to our website and then or Google NJSBDC Tech Team, you'll find the live link and you'll be able to request counseling.
Yep, perfect. And those links have also been shared in the chat. So
Thank you.
if you click on those links directly in the chat, it should open up the website on your browser. All right. Wolfgang asks, what is the range for the principal investigator in the budget?
That's a great question, and there's no dictated amount for that. It really, or well, let me answer this in two ways because I just realized maybe you mean the question in a different way. So my first reaction was no, because each project will require someone to do certain activities, and they're over a period of time, and the base salary is multiplied by the period of time and by the level of effort, and that's how you get the answer. Maybe though what you're asking me, so the agencies don't dictate that. Maybe though what you're asking me is about the base salary limitations. There are limitations around the base salary, and it has to be sort of market rate. A good source for that information is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the BLS, which is a federal government agency also that posts market rate salaries for all kinds of different positions. That gets a little down in the weeds, so don't hesitate again to ask for help because there's a lot of categories on there. It might be a little confusing if you've never looked there before to find the right base salary. And then, depending upon the agency, there are some either allowances or specific guidelines that apply only to the agency. So, trying to give you as best an answer as I can without knowing your specific situation, and would encourage you to follow up.
All right. Yep. Please follow up. Next question is from Ellen, who asks, Cheryl used 40% for indirect cost in her slide example. How did you arrive at that percentage? Is that the max allowable?
Yes, that is the max allowed. A small business applicant can short their indirect costs. However, if you short them, in other words, if you ask for less than 40% in a phase one, then in the future, if you want to raise that percentage, you have to justify on what basis you think it should be raised. So a lot of times we recommend that people just go to the max right away so that you don't have to go through that later justification. Another reason for going to the max is that, frankly, if you haven't ever run a business before, you might be surprised at how many things uh, fall into the indirect cost pool, and you you may be surprised that you can eat that up rather quickly. What the government doesn't want to have happen is for you to short yourself there. That's why they have established that 40% benchmark, because they want your business to grow and thrive. They don't want it to start out, be short of funds, and fail.
Got it. Thank you for that, Ellen. Um, all right. Can you provide a sample or outline for a bio sketch for PIs or industry professionals?
Yes, not easily in this webinar, but if you, there are several variations of them by agency. So if you connect with us, we'd be happy to provide those forms that you need.
Got it. We have two questions from Ladan. They ask, are there any recommendations or common practices for salaries and some of the indirect costs?
I don't know quite how you mean that question because what I tried to cover in this webinar is those very things. In other words, some sort of general guidelines. So, for example, the slide where I showed the cost calculations, if I go way back there, this one, uh, these are the generalities, but what might differ, Ladon, is if you had an agency whose award phase one award amount was not 295, right? If you had one that was 100 or 305 or whatever, all of these figures are going to change. So these are sort of the generalities. We've gone through the definitions of the each type. uh, there isn't anything as granular as um, by cost category that makes sense to provide in a general presentation like this. But if you, again, contact us, we could give you calculations that would show the specifics for any particular agency. It's important for us to understand which agency you're talking about because there are so many ifs, ands, or buts in this realm.
Got it. And the next question they had asked was, is the budget justification an absolute must, or is it just a needed when the committee asks?
Nope, it's required with the application up front.
We have a question from Geraldine, and I think I can take that, but feel free to answer as well. Cheryl, can real estate entrepreneurs benefit of the counseling? Have you gotten any real estate small business owners for counseling in your experience so far with us?
Uh, if you are looking at like property management or something like that, um, unless you have a technology that is for the property management industry, I'm not seeing an obvious fit for SBIR STTR. I would think there might be other sources of funding that might be able to help you depending on what your need is.
Yeah,
However, what I can say is if you come in our door and we talk to you and do like an initial, let's call it a screening or an initial introduction, we'll figure that out really fast that you belong elsewhere. And the wonderful thing is that we have an entire other set of folks who are specialists in other realms, and they would be happy to help you. So, you can
Yep,
come in the wrong door and we'll still help you figure out where you belong.
exactly. And that's the best part about it. Thank you for that, Cheryl. So yeah, jewelry to answer that for our general counseling, non-tech related, you can definitely come in. Please do come in, request counseling, and we'll figure out what you need help with exactly. And just to tell you, uh, recently, we were sharing press releases from NJEDA. I think we were sharing it just last week or even this past Tuesday on from NJEDA how they had grants or funding available for real estate developers and this and that. So there are resources available in New Jersey besides NJSBDC. But yeah, please come in for counseling and we'll direct you in the right direction, hopefully. Um, all right, moving on to Anonymous, who asks, what is the upper limit for renting land/warehouse?
There is no upper limit for that. Again, it has to be justified and reasonable. It, it, um, I think if agency personnel were looking at that and you had like some kind of crazy sky high budget that was obviously way overblown, they would know because they see these budgets all the time. But there is no sort of official there's no official figure that's published for that cost category.
Got it. Next question is from Anonymous. I'm looking to get NSF Phase 1. Do I need to have a team already set up, or will you help me find a research team?
That's an excellent question. If you have an innovation in mind, we can help you with the team building. And that may include you eventually hiring some folks, but it may also include a kind of a work for hire situation where you have only contractors and consultants, depending upon the nature of your business. But yes, we can definitely help you with matchmaking and things like that.
Exactly. All right, and we'll take the final question from Ellen. Is there a way or a website, a resource where applicants can see samples of actual awarded proposals?
Yes. However, we never recommend that you do that. And it's going to seem counterintuitive, but let me explain the reason why. If you think about yourself as an applicant, you would not want your confidential information put out to the public so that they could look at it, right? Because every small business has competitors or would be competitors. And so, in order for them, the agencies or even us, to share with you uh, examples or samples of work, what the only way that that can work out without breaching confidentiality, which we would never do, is that the work be very, very old. When the work is very old, the chances are very high, I would say 100% chance that they will not uh, be um, using the same instruction set because the agencies change their instructions frequently and without advance notice. So if you look at something that's, say, 5 or 7 years old, you're going to be looking at something that if you were to use it as a template, instead of looking at the current instruction set, you could be miles off target. So it's not a great idea to even look because once you look, you're going to say, oh, it's supposed to look like that. It's hard to keep our mind from thinking, oh, it's supposed to look like that. The reality is not supposed to look like that. So there's a lot of danger involved with that. I understand why you're asking the question. It's like, oh, if I could only see one, it would be better. But honestly, I recommend against it. And nearly every consultant I know would recommend likewise. They're too out of date.
I was muted. Sorry. We did just get one more question from Munjin. We'll just address that really quickly.
Sure.
Uh, if looking for help with NIH SBIR fund now? Which deadline should I plan to apply to?
That's the way that I understand your question is you think timeliness is crucial. That is always important, but the thing is, it really depends on the mission fit with the agency more than the timing. So I don't think there's a good answer that I can give you that's a generic correct answer for that. I would need to know more to help you figure out which agency you're most likely to succeed with funding request.
Got it. All right. So hopefully that is, yes, no more questions. So that concludes our Q&A session and our webinar, our presentation with you, Cheryl. I just have a couple more things to share and just show our audience, but won't take more than
Great.
maybe 5 minutes. But with that, thank you so much, Cheryl. We really appreciate you. And
It
hopefully
is
for our
always a
next webinar,
pleasure.
yep, exactly. Same, likewise. And for our next webinar with you, that is to be announced. So we don't know the exact date yet, but keep an eye out on our Eventbrite page and our website. Thank you, Cheryl. All right. So to our audience, the links that we've been sharing, I'll just quickly show them to you right now. NJSBDC.com. This is a great resource for you to look through. So if you have maybe 2-3 minutes of your time dedicated to this website, go through. We have blog posts, we have a resource hub, we have podcasts. If you wanted to request counseling, general counseling, this would be it. You would put in your email, county that you're from in New Jersey, request counseling. If you're interested in requesting counseling from the tech team, we do have a different page. And that is this, njsbc.com/tech team altogether. And pretty simple. And this would get you to this page. The only reason that we like to differentiate is because we want to get you to the right people, to the right person. Same thing, but this will direct you, this will take you directly to the tech team. Excuse me. Um, Going back to the homepage, if you go to events and NJ Thrive Small Business Webinars, it'll take you to this page. You should definitely subscribe to our newsletters. Hint, hint, you get a direct email in your inbox. So this is the video library that I was talking about. Besides our YouTube channel, we have tons and tons of webinars. For example, you'll see, where's Cheryl? Right here. A practical guide to SBIR STTR research for small businesses, proposing winning research projects, many, many different topics, with whether it's, NASA, SBIR, QuickBooks, marketing strategies for the holiday season. You just keep loading more and you'll get more. Besides our webinars, our statewide events that happen, if you go to this page, we have many different webinars and in-person events happening. So if you go to this page, pick your location. These are all our regional centers that are having these events. So you can see that we have in Spanish, we have in English. So yeah, feel free to check out our website and go through them. Our next webinar that we're having is on Tuesday. It is on how to register a small business. So for our audience here, I don't think it would be that relevant because you already are in business. That means you've registered your business. But if you have a friend, family member who is looking to start a small business and they're a little lost on how to register, then please check this out. This webinar is very helpful. We walk you through the 3 steps on how to registering an LLC here in New Jersey. Keeping that in mind, that is on Tuesday, not a Thursday, 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. on December 5th. With that, our tech team has helped many, many innovators grow. No cost, listen to me, excuse me, no cost pitch to proposal consulting, training and events starting at $0, exclusive small business tech resources. Visit our website and we look forward to hearing from you. This is Uzma signing off. We hope to see you next week on a Tuesday or a Thursday. So I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye. Take care.